Yes, hi, hello, welcome to Gooncast. I'm James, also known as Saber0307 on Twitch and on other stuff, professional hack fraud. And once again, I'm joined by my wonderful co-hosts as we decide to dive into some new thingy.
Hell yeah. What's up, everybody? I'm Cat Attack, aka the Attack Cat on Twitch, dialogue designer by day, streamer, artist, writer by night, and lover of all things horror.
And it's your boy Lee Alder, the Valley Jester, fantasy and horror writer. Currently writing out a rough draft of my tweet longer to announce my resignation from the Gooncast following this episode.
What?
Yeah, it's become a hostile workplace.
Yeah.
I've
that's
taken
right.
some
We're
umbrage with
canceling
our I've taken some umbrage with our fellow goon.
And we would also like to introduce or welcome back onto the podcast.
Yeah.
This
boy
guy.
Mike.
Yeah, thank you. It's Mike, friend of the Goon Squad. We're here to dissect another spooky movie.
Basically an
It's gonna be a
honorary
spicy one.
goon at this point.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're here to we're here to talk about candy lads and candy lasses.
Indeed.
The candy folk.
The candy folk.
Yeah, so
The people
Finally.
with the candy.
finally after months, I dare say, not maybe weeks, after months of waiting for this movie to not be exclusively in theaters, we finally got to watch 2021's Candyman.
We did.
And it's gonna be a spicy podcast, folks.
We did. This is the first podcast where there's disagreements among the quality of the film, so that should be a very interesting discussion. Hence why Lee's obviously resigning, and he's going to be starting the new Gooncast.
It's gonna be me and
Blackjack
Lee.
and hookers.
The Neo Gooncast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Neo
just slap
Gooncast
a
and
fresh coat of paint over that shit. Keep everything the same.
Proto
Yeah,
Gooncast.
it's just Lee going, hi, yes, hi, hello.
Hi, yes, hi, hello. David Lynch memes.
Drakengard, Illbleed.
Drakengard Elf.
I hate Corpse
Peter voice
Party.
I don't even think Lee could go that far. I don't.
No.
Like I think
No,
I think Lee's a closeted Corpse Party fan.
No, I would realistically resign from the Gooncast and then team up with one of our associates, Niku Senpai, and start a podcast just about Corpse Party.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. It'll be called the Busty
man.
Waifus Cut Podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
And then it'll be banned because it's just talking about fucking lollies.
Oh, all right. Enough ragging on Corpse Party. Let's get to why we're here.
Yes.
I guess we should start as we start with most like franchises, with kind of like our histories of,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
our experiences with the Candyman franchise. I guess I'll go first and just say that like I've never read the short story it's based on, or the novella, I guess.
Yeah, novella.
But I have seen I saw the original, obviously, and I've seen I believe I've seen the two sequels to it, but I only vaguely remember the third one. I mostly remember the one that's in New Orleans. And I personally really liked this reimagining.
Well, I guess I'll tail on that one because I'm the other one who was not freakishly offended by the movie. But also I have the least amount of history with this franchise. I've seen Candyman, I think once, maybe pieces of it here and there since that viewing. I don't have much of a stake in the franchise as much as I adore Tony Todd as a horror icon.
Oh, he's so good.
And I'm a gigantic fan of Clive Barker's work.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And it's not for lack of interest, I guess, that I never really pursued the franchise. It's just one of those ones where stars didn't align. There's plenty of classics I haven't seen, and this was just one of those ones that I didn't give much time to, but I did enjoy what they did with the new 2021 version.
So I've seen the original Candyman. I saw it at first when I was a kid, and I wasn't that big of a fan because I thought it was slow and weird because, you know, I was young and unable to appreciate art. And then upon revisiting it later, I grew very, very attached to the film. I wouldn't necessarily call it like sacred or anything like that, but Tony Todd has just this wonderful fucking gothic horror persona in it where it's just seductive and mesmerizing, and Virginia Madsen fucking kills it, and the score and everything.
Yeah,
Philip Glass's score. I haven't seen the sequels. I have seen a video that kind of was like joke reviewing the entire original trilogy a few weeks ago, so that's about my extent about Candyman in New Orleans and then Candyman in Los Angeles. Haven't read the short story or novella. I was going to, but then I got lazy. And I was really looking forward to this film, and I can say that it is a well shot, mostly well acted film with a lot of style, but I fucking hated it.
I have to chuckle that you said you grew up not liking it because it was slow and weird, and you had us watch all of Twin Peaks.
Hey man, I saw Twin Peaks. If I saw Twin Peaks as a kid, I'd probably think it was slow and weird. I saw it as an adult when I could appreciate slow and weird shit.
Yeah. So, Candyman for me was also a childhood movie experience. I have like a lot of memories as like a wee lad, like in my childhood home, like being in the hallway, pretending not to be or pretending to be asleep, and like watching my mom watching horror films. Like, that was like a huge stint of my like childhood, you know. And this is one of those movies that I kind of like snuck in at first. I remember being like so scared. I've like seen it again like several times throughout my life, but I gotta come clean in many ways here because while I am a friend of the Gooncast, I'm also not a very learned movie appreciator. I've seen a lot of movies, but I guess if I were to compare numbers with any of you guys, that number would probably be pretty small. And I'm also kind of guilty of appreciating the art more than the artists. I've like my brain power and those kinds of things has always gone to like remembering members of bands and stuff, not like producers or like directors or screenplay writers and such, you know. So I saw this movie like several times throughout my life, being a Clive, being a fan of Clive, Clive, but I never really put it together that he was responsible for the already for that OG film. That was actually a thing that Saber brought to my attention a few times now. My like appreciation for the original film does connect to this new 2021 version in a few ways, but I also got to come clean that I hated this movie, and I feel like I'm gonna have to ask you guys to bear with me as I eventually explain. And I'm sure we're all gonna dig in, but I can definitely admit that part of my gripes with this movie are just I don't know, maybe personal or like or a bit biased or whatever. But yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you like what you like.
For sure, yeah.
I gotta say, I've got this beautiful mental image of like, if you all have seen Dreamcatcher, Stephen King portrays people's mental capacity as a bunch of file cabinets that you can store just, you know, there's a finite amount of storage space that you can keep in there. And so I'm imagining Mike's as just like file cabinet after file cabinet of like producers, guitarists, keyboardists, and then there's this one little drawer off to the side that's just got bees pouring out of it. And Mike's like, we don't touch that filing cabinet over there.
That's a Candyman drawer.
Don't you go near that Candyman drawer.
It's very special.
And then also knowing Mike, there's an entire wall of filing cabinets that's just devoted to children on fire.
Oh, Jesus.
The
inside.
Podcast, boys.
I know. To briefly explain, it's a silly inside joke between Saber and I that has lived for a long time because in a novel that I had Saber read a draft of, there was a scene where some young folk died, and he just couldn't stop talking about it. He couldn't stop laughing about it, and it's just been a thing. Anyway,
Well, I mean,
Isn't
it's
that always the best?
it's not. I'm just gonna say, man, it's not every day you're reading a dark fantasy novel and just there's a scene of children on fire. All right, it stuck with me. It really connected with me on a deep personal level where I still
read.
I still just want to say that if I ever am fortunate enough to become a director, I'm going to adapt your novel, but it's just going to be 2 hours of children on fire.
Oh my God.
No, that's going to be your little flourish. That's going to be your little filmmaker's flourish. It's like, oh, Alfred Hitchcock has a walk-on cameo for just a few seconds in every film. It's like, if you watch a James film, somewhere in the background there's a child on fire.
Well, I mean, you say that, but at one point, like years ago, Mike and I were collaborating on a writing project, and I gave him my draft about like the main character's backstory, and he was reading it, and then he just starts laughing because I included children on fire, just because I know it would make him laugh. As awful as this sounds.
This is the content you come to the Gooncast for, folks.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But also, don't you just love it when you give somebody a project of yours that you've been working really hard on, and you're like, "Hey, can you give me some feedback?" And they just make memes.
I mean, I gave him feedback,
and they just laugh about it in your face.
I liked this novel a lot.
It's like, I mean, like, no, can you give me some advice? Did you feel the pain of the protagonist in chapter 3, like towards the end? You burned the kids. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Man,
I've definitely had moments of like, hey, I worked really hard on this, and then there's like one thing that's like off or slightly weird about it, and then that's the thing that my friends focus on for years. They're like, remember that time when you said this thing in your writing? And I'm like, yeah, I do. Thank you.
Yeah, but I genuinely like the scene. I just also am an asshole, and I think it's funny.
Oh yeah, my friends as well.
yeah. That's how that goes. Yeah.
All right, back to the bees.
That's just the way.
Yeah.
Back to bees. Okay, so obviously all of us at least have a passing familiarity with the original movie. So how do we want to break this down? Do we want to just like get right into the new movie? Do we want to like talk about the original a little bit and our feelings on that? Because I think everyone here enjoyed at least the original.
Yeah, I think that it's, when it comes to remakes or reboots, it's always proper to kind of like establish, the where it came from first. But yeah, I am not the expert on that topic, so I suppose I'm volunteering someone else for this.
Real quickly, I take a tiny bit of umbrage with calling this a like remake. Because
that is fair. That is fair.
Yeah.
It's a sequel.
It's a sequel. It's like the Halloween 2018 thing.
Yes, it's a sequel, and also it kind of, to me at least, I feel like it drastically alters the, not genre, but the tone and the like
very much
mood of the movie or of the franchise.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, I feel like reimagining or like. I think Jay Bauman said it best with like Chucky, the Child's Play remake. Even though I hated Child's Play and I don't agree with like them enjoying the remake, but like that it's like almost like a cover. I think that was Jay, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my vibe on the new one. But anyway, Back to the old one.
I will say briefly on the new one, like, and this is just a general trend that I kind of fucking hate in Hollywood, or even I guess in just media in general. And it's the same criticism I have for Halloween 2018, and the same criticism I have for the new Scream movie, and that's where you make a sequel, but it has the same title as the first, but it's not a remake.
Yes.
And like,
yes.
I genuinely dislike that, because it's like, for like, just using Halloween as example, we have 3 movies called Halloween. One is the original, one is Rob Zombie's remake, and one is a sequel to the original. And it's like, that's fucking silly. And like, this new Scream movie is a sequel to Screams 1 through 4, but it's just called Scream. And this new Candyman is a sequel to the first Candyman, but it's just called Candyman. Or like The Thing was a prequel to John Carpenter's The Thing, but it's just called The Thing.
I'd like to see a little more creativity in the titles. I mean, let's borrow some naming conventions from Kingdom Hearts. I need Candyman 358 over Bees Gold Edition.
Over Bees.
There we go.
Yeah.
So
a fleeting dream hook. You know, I need something.
Yeah.
The exact right lesson to take from the Kingdom Hearts naming conventions.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
That we need more of it.
So, Candyman, the original movie, is based off of a Clive Barker story called The Forbidden, which is part of Books of Blood Volume 5. The biggest... I haven't read it, I just know kind of generally it's pretty faithful, outside of the major key differences being the original story is set in London, and Candyman is a yellow, like a waxy skinned white man. He does not have a hook for a hand. He is not summoned by the mirror. Those are 2 things that were brought in for the film, and it's kind of its own little short story within Books of Blood. And then when Bernard Rose decided to adapt it into a film, he decided to translate. Despite being a British man himself, he felt it appropriate to change the setting to, at the time, contemporary Chicago in sort of like the gentrified areas of the city, and in in Cabrini Green, change Candyman to be an African American, and give him a hook for a hand and allow him to be summoned from a mirror, since the whole idea was kind of like the themes of like urban legends and whatnot. So he basically took the elements of like the classic urban legend of the Hook and the classic urban legend of Bloody Mary and sort of merged these 2 together on top of Clive Barker's story in order to sort of amplify it, while also kind of amplifying the Cabrini Green housing development project compared to like the slums of London, and make it more about race and gentrification and white privilege and all this other fun stuff that was, at least I feel, even though some elements are probably a little dated since it was made in the 1990s, early 90s, holds up really, really well and is fairly nuanced and intelligent, and Tony Todd is fucking mesmerizing. As I mentioned earlier, and it had Virginia Madsen in a stellar performance, and just, it's kind of a very haunting and slow, methodical film. Like, you don't even see Tony Todd's Candyman until like the 45-minute mark. It's just this build up and build up and build up, and like the only real violence that you see in the movie up until that point is Virginia Madsen's character getting smacked on the side of the face with a hook by a bad guy, like the blunt end, so she gets a black eye, and a flashback where we hear the story of how a child was severely mutilated, allegedly by Candyman, in sort of nearby bathrooms.
Yeah. I definitely agree with everything that you said, as a fan of the first film. And there's in talking about the this 2021 input into the series, there is kind of a divide in themes that's pretty noticeable, I think. And while it's definitely not a bad way to go, I definitely think there were some droppings of the ball in the in the first film. There's definitely a focus on the like racial aspect of the story, and like turning the like concept of as James said, the like urban myth into your horror movie slasher, you know. I feel like it was definitely well done in that first film, and there are aspects of this new one that felt pretty cool too, in terms of the like horror film slasher. You know, I personally am a very big fan of the spirit of revenge concept in the stories like The Crow and so on.
yeah.
You know, they're like always really fun, and I think the way that it happened in the original, while it involved racial injustice and murder and like revenge, it was only an aspect of it. And I think one of the details of the movie that speaks to the comparison of the two is that in the first film, the Candyman has a goal. He has a motive. You see it happen in the first scene that you see him. He fixates on the protagonist of the film, and every subsequent sighting of him and every murder is pretty much about her. And in this new film, there's definitely not that type of concise methodology, or whatever you want to call it.
To jump in here, I think that kind of circles back to my point about the new movie kind of changing the tone on almost like a genre flip, because I feel like in some ways the original Candyman is more of a slasher movie, because you are focused on a singular character of the Candyman. You were focused on Tony Todd as the Candyman and his very singular focus on Helen, right?
Yeah.
But this new one, I feel like, was almost a reinvention of the character as more of a non-specific, like, again, an urban myth, right? So I think that was more of the focus of this film, where it was taking away that slasher aspect and replacing it with more of a ghost story, where it's almost more fitting that we don't know what the goal of the Candyman is, because he's this unknowable force that takes on these masks of these different victims.
That is definitely true, and I think there is also a pretty hard angle in the theme of this new film, in which there are, as you said, like multiple of these slasher characters in this story, and the
just to interject real quick, like, even though it's kind of standard at this point for Gooncast, full spoilers for the new movie, by the way.
Oh gosh, yes.
So,
definitely don't. I mean, I don't think we have not yet hit on anything that I think would constitute as a spoiler, but and I also don't think there's anything as big as, like, Malignant to spoil.
Sure.
In terms of, like, twists, but yes. Yes. Good.
Which,
good
by
call,
the way,
James.
people, we've given you plenty of time since the last fucking podcast. You get out there and you give Malignant your money.
Yeah,
It was great.
100%. Yes.
yeah. Mike wasn't on the Gooncast, but he watched *Malignant* and he fucking.
I loved it.
Yeah.
God. Yes. Now,
Anyway, where were
back
we?
to a thing we disagree about.
Yeah. So the core theme in that like separates this new one from the first is that spoilers, the Candyman that you knew from the original film is not the Candyman this film primarily follows. It is a new character. The name was Herman something. Sorry.
I got the.
No,
wiki
it's
up
The
right
main
now.
character.
Sherman.
Fields.
Yes, Sherman Fields.
Oh, the
right,
original.
right.
Yes, the original.
Right.
Yeah. Sherman Fields.
And while this character, like the original Candyman, was a black man murdered by racist people, he has in this movie the like presence between the two Candymen, the one that you knew if you saw the first movie, and the one that you're seeing in this new one, the level of impact and charisma and whatever other fancy words you would use to describe a human being are like not there, because in this movie this Candyman never says a word. And while I understand that doesn't make sense in some slasher movies, I feel like the theme of Candyman 2021 is racial injustice. It is not an aspect of the movie the way that it was in the old version of the film. It's the theme of the film.
Yes.
And we see it in multiple instances. However, the way it's portrayed is something that I feel like is like debatable on its tact.
Okay. I would agree with you that the new Candyman is definitely not as charismatic as Tony Todd. But again, I'd circle back and say I don't think that was the point. I think they weren't going for replacing Tony Todd with this new guy, and I think that's made clear by the ending, even though the ending is a bit confusing. And also I think maybe where, even though I really like the movie, I think maybe it lost its way a tiny bit at the end, and I think we'll explain once we get there.
That's one thing I just want to like chime in with, like with the new Candyman, like for me personally, and I was talking about this with Mike, like one of my chief problems with the new Candyman is just it muddles the mythos slightly, just in the sense of just like my confusion of like, okay, so if you say Candyman in a mirror 5 times, which Candyman is coming at you? And
okay, so that actually goes.
My main like point of contention, and I was discussing this with Mike, and I when we watched it after the three of us watched it, was that a lot of it just stems from the fact that Sherman Fields is killed in the prologue in 1977, right? And I don't quite think I would have had that issue if, say, the prologue was like a year or two after the first Candyman movie, where you have maybe a Coleman Domingo's character witnesses it in the 90s as opposed to the 70s, because at the end of the first Candyman, you could kind of see it as Tony Todd's myth and legend of the Candyman being destroyed, especially since this film kind of doesn't really reference the second and third film all that much, and it kind of acts as if Candyman has been gone for the last 30 years and nobody's talked about it.
Okay, so this is my interpretation. I could very well be wrong, but again, I will reiterate, I think that the muddling of the mythos was kind of the point, because I think they were going for more of that, it's a purely word of mouth, urban legend type story where you don't actually know kind of like where, like who Candyman actually is, right? They have all of these stories that they've attributed to him, and you hear various versions, including the original Tony Todd version. But there's no real true version until you start getting to the end where it's like, oh yes, you are the baby from that original myth that you heard. Which, like, I think to answer your question about like, oh, which Candyman are you getting when you summon him in the mirror? I think part of what the movie was going for was that it depends on the myth that you've heard.
Sure.
So the art installation that the main character creates is based on the Sherman legend of the Candyman. Yeah. And so therefore, the majority of the movie, because essentially this mirror, his art piece is sort of the jumping off point to the Candyman urban legend becoming more in vogue, more in the current vernacular, and then that's when the killings start happening across, like, the art gallery owner gets killed, the high school girls get killed. It's like, and all of them were inspired by this art piece that was inspired by the Sherman legend in Cabrini Green.
There's a few more scenes in the film that also serve your point as well. Like the first time we see Sherman, that's for anyone who saw the first film a jarring moment. Like that's not the face or the myth that I know about. Sure. And also,
yes, exactly.
There's a very cool scene, the shadow play paper cutout.
Oh God, we haven't even talked about that yet.
Oh, we'll get to the art direction.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But that's that scene as well when characters are told the myth in a new version is also like again it serves your point in that both of these films are definitely playing with and about the concept of urban folklore,
Yeah, and I think
there's
maybe
new stories.
Yeah, and I think maybe that could have been clarified a little better in the film. Sure. Like I think maybe they could have hinted at that a little. Maybe have, like, once the main character starts hearing more of these stories after his Sherman piece has kind of taken off, maybe he starts seeing in the mirror instead of Sherman one of the other myths, and we do kind of get a hint of that at the end because at the very end of the movie, the final shot basically is the Candyman, like the bees parting, revealing a DH Tony Todd saying, like, tell everyone. Yeah. And so that I think was supposed to be our in to say, oh, it's Candyman is like all of them basically, or it's an idea more so than an actual person.
And I appreciate that a lot, and I appreciate the fact that it's like trying to do its own thing, but like with the fact that the main character is Anthony McCoy, the baby from the first one, like his, and I mentioned it, after we watched it, and I mentioned it to Mike too, like he has that line to his mom, I guess he found me, and it's like it didn't have any impact for me because it wasn't Todd,
Yes.
And I thought about it after the fact, and this, I brought this up with Mike, and I kind of hinted at it a little bit in our post viewing discussion, but I kind of think that, as much as I love Tony Todd, his appearance at the end, and even the fact that they announced that Tony Todd is in the movie, kind of even hurt the film a little bit further for me, because it felt similar to Terminator Dark Fate, where they were like, hey, Edward Furlong's back, and it's just digitally de-aged Eddie Furlong for like a minute, and it's just like, you sold me on something, but that's not what you gave me.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
Yes, okay, so I'm kind of two minds on that, because initially because in our post discussion, I remember I agreed with you that I thought even though I love Tony Todd and I'm so glad that, he had some small part to play in the remake or in the reimagining, I did kind of feel initially that maybe it was a little too like, this feels like fan service more so than an actual plot point of the movie to have him show up now.
Absolutely.
And now on a little bit more reflection, and I also rewatched the movie just before this podcast to decide that yes, I still like it a lot. I think the movie actually would have been better served if we had seen more of him, because I think that line, that well, I guess he found me line, would have been more impactful if we had seen in the course of the main character kind of losing his mind and going further and further down this rabbit hole of what is the Candyman. If he had started seeing other Candymen as he, was progressively getting more and more backstories, and eventually culminating in him seeing Tony Todd and maybe something clicking for him to go see his mom.
Yeah, what we have an issue with here is that Candyman is at the same time trying to be presented as two different concepts. He's being presented as a force with a face, the face of Tony Todd. He is a singular being that is out for a reason. He knows who this kid is. He's grown up. He's going to follow him, bring chaos to his life, whatever.
He's the one victim who escaped.
Right. But at the same time, Candyman is also being represented as more of like an all-encompassing blanketing force. He's meant to represent the oppression of authority onto the impoverished. He's meant to represent like the vengeance of this poor neighborhood. And it's hard to have him be this symbol of vengeance and be this single person at the same time and not. So
I definitely agree. Yeah.
They needed to commit to one side or the other. They needed to not have Tony Todd in this movie at all and have him be this legion of lost voices coming back to strike down the people that oppressed them and treated them poorly. Or it needed to just be Candyman is this killer, this supernatural force that's a single being. And it tried to do both, which, all devil's advocate, I liked the movie, but that's something they really needed to decide in the writer's room what they wanted to do.
Definitely.
I think I agree with that, even though for me anyway, I do think that the kind of mixing of the two worked for me. But yes, I think given the divisiveness certainly of within our little group, I think maybe a little bit more of a solid idea on how to execute that, or at the very least how to execute that, or just picking a lane.
It felt like I noticed this too also on rewatch, like there's like the entire girlfriend storyline, for example, it kind of feels like a dead end, like outside of
you mean the
Brianna storyline with her, the fact that her father committed suicide and her career as like this art gallery owner. Like she kind of becomes almost the protagonist in the third act of the movie.
Well, she has to, because the protagonist goes insane.
Yeah, of course. I'm like, I agree with that, but like it feels as though like her dad committing suicide is just there because, well, now Anthony's going insane and she doesn't want anything to do with like another artist going insane, where it's like I was figuring, okay, maybe her dad's death is tying into the Candyman mythos, or maybe there's going to be because he was a painter, or maybe there was something more with like her career where like Anthony's presence is kind of impacting her career a bit more. But it's like we just get that scene at the gallery where it's like the other lady is like, oh, we'd love to have your work here, etc., and then it just kind of stops. And I think that's also kind of my thing with like the third act, where it just feels really, really, really rushed. Like, as much as I don't like the movie, I think the movie would have benefited by like being, I don't know, another 20 minutes longer. Just to
honestly,
breathe a
probably.
lot more. And
yes. So let's actually get into that third act. Although real quick, I also want to bring up the bitchy white lady critic.
The art
who
critic,
is like, she's like my favorite character.
Sick.
Because
she had a really good quote. Yeah,
she, like, oh my god, just like the way she's written is so like it's kind of unrealistic. Like I really like the way she's written. Where like you're almost like, oh my god, are you going to say something horribly racist? And then she's like, I hate artists. And you're like,
exactly.
All right.
I personally loved that. Okay, so
it was so funny.
I kind of want to jump off of that because that was a really great scene, and it kind of toyed with the viewer, in my opinion, because there are several scenes within the first half hour of this movie where the characters are having topical conversations about racism and like areas being like gentrified and so on. And that scene that you're talking about, like with the art, like critic, I feel like kind of subverted how heavy-handed that point had been up until that point.
Yes, that's very true.
Was a really refreshing moment for me in the movie, for sure.
I think there were a couple of clever moments of like racial tension subversion where like because I also noted the dinner party scene when they're talking about gentrification and they're going on and on about how like, oh, white people built up the ghetto and then want just to tear it down. And then like the one white guy in the room is just like, you mean like this building we're in right now that you guys live in because you're super rich?
Yeah,
and it's just like dead silent.
Nice.
And the brother has to be like, let's tell a ghost story.
Yeah, I really
so good. Yeah,
I really wanted a lot more stuff like that where it like kind of presents it as a bit more nuanced. Like it's one of the things where like I was talking with Mike, like there's this scene with Coleman Domingo's character when he's explaining like how Candyman is multiple people and Candyman is what we come up with to deal with racism and stuff like that. And like for me, and Mike was saying it as well, was just like that would have hit so much harder if there was just more. I don't know if there was less sledgehammer-y type moments, sort of.
When you're telling stories, especially in like novels or not even in like any type of story, it's always a more effective technique to show what's happening rather than tell it. And I understand that this is like a weird area to like tiptoe around, but if you're going to make a movie about like, call it as it is, about like black men like murdered by racism returning as like spirits of revenge, like I would say you probably shouldn't have those like three of the same archetype all like committing like murder. Like the slasher scenes are all against like this is all right. It's about to get hot, guys. I personally believe it's a little strange, again, that the Candyman that we follow in this movie never says a word, even though they're obviously trying in this movie to start a conversation about race and about like injustice, so on. And the character who you like created to embody the anger that comes from that type of death, again, like never says a word, but to further targets in his murders like annoying white people. Like the first two kills of the movie are
A bunch of hipsters.
yeah, they're like,
hipsters.
God, we know you like Joy Division.
dude, oh, I was so mad.
Yeah, Mike was so fucking mad.
She kept speaking. Yeah, I do think a lot of the white people in this movie are kind of just caricatures, which in and of itself is kind of a neat little subversion. But I also think
I suppose so, yeah.
It's 2021 and like
exactly,
it's kind of like we can have them be fleshed out characters, but also
thank you. And like, there was a scene like I just have to get this out because this might be one of my most like a pivotal moment in this movie, and I'm sure as soon as I say it, James is gonna know because I was like laughing. It just broke me. Like the movie establishes that there are multiple Candymen, as it were, and they all have the same the same like origin story, as it were. They're all black men who were like killed, and as the movie tells the viewer that like its theme is this serious, the next kill that happens in the movie is a bunch of high school like white girl kids who get murdered in a bathroom. Like it's just a little weird. Like, and again, I said this at the beginning of the podcast. I am definitely willing to admit that my gripes with this movie are concerning its theme, and I feel like its theme is extremely serious topic to choose. You're already like tackling this theme within a horror movie, so how serious can it be? And of course, you suspend your disbelief or whatever. But there's really no escaping what the movie was trying to say, in my opinion. And in that sense, I feel like the movie did not take itself seriously. And this is my last point for now, but we were mentioning earlier some slip-ups and some awkward pacing in the third act. And in the third act, the character of William Burke, towards the climax of the story, reveals that the spell of insanity that the protagonist Anthony is experiencing is because he's been chosen to become the next Candyman, the third one, I suppose, in the canon of this film. And the scene in the end of the movie in which you see him lose his arm, and if I'm not doing enough justice to the scene, please like jump in because it was great. But again, it's the theme that's like gotten me a little like itched. But in that scene, Burke, this like character, gives his like stereotypical villain speech. He's got a he like has to explain why he's doing this. And his
I mean, it comes out of nowhere. In fairness, and it is still very, very tropey. But in fairness, we have not gotten a lot of screen time with that character, so we do kind of like. I feel like that explanation was necessary because definitely he was basically just sort of the catalyst for like Anthony to start discovering things on his own and to begin his descent into madness / Candymanhood.
That's his third scene in the movie is his villain reveal, and it's like that's part of my thing with the third act where it's like I wish he had more screen time, so we could have developed
had a lot more
or like maybe build up to him a bit more as opposed to just
I think that could
LOL, I'm the villain, by the way.
Well, I think that goes back to that the third act felt rushed.
For sure.
But will say, despite the fact that, all of us are complaining about it, I, was basically slack-jawed watching those final like 20 minutes.
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
I think even though I had some problems with like keeping up with the narrative, just because I felt like it was a little bit, it was trying to tie things up really, really fast, a little too fast, and should have just spread it out a little more. I thought the way that they delivered that was just, I thought it was great. I was on the edge of my seat waiting for watching everything unfolding, and just like, for me, props to everyone behind the camera and in front of the camera for delivering a really solid like conclusion. At the very least, a compelling and enjoyable to watch conclusion for me. Again, and I say repeatedly for me because I know this is where like Saber really started to hate the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm the one who was on the side of liking this movie, and I don't like the third act at all.
Yeah, maybe I'm the only one who likes the third act, but
yeah, like even God, it's
so
before we get into this, because it ties into the third act, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though it would maybe, so basically one of the big third act thing is really hammering home the point that the movie is trying to make about racism and racist cops and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that like Mike pointed out to me as well, and we were discussing in our viewing of it, even though this would have potentially made it a little too similar to the first film, every single murder in this movie is associated and linked to Anthony McCoy and his art installation. Like, it's the Say My Name killers. And the first two victims are someone he had a public screaming match with, basically, in the middle of this art installation showcase. And the second victim, the critic, he literally leaves her house seconds before she's murdered. He's the last person to see her alive. And
she's not the second victim, is she?
Yeah, she is.
I thought the high school girls came first.
No, they're the last ones.
Yeah.
And they're right before the third act, the high school chicks.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the high school girls there was also linked to the art installation. But not once throughout the entire movie is Anthony even kind of brought in for questioning by the cops to like establish even like earlier on, like the racism angle, like and even to tie home the whole we've been looking for you sort of thing. It's like
if you're trying to show and not tell, like maybe have a quick scene where the police at least ask him some questions.
You have like some cop trying to like get a hold of him or something.
Totally.
Like you have honestly, something.
Like, makes no sense. Like, how can you have a movie about again, like the current Candyman is murdered by a huge gang of police, and we see it in a flashback. Like, how can you have a scene or a film that's about that? Like, the origin story is a spirit of revenge of like racial like murder, but you're not gonna like show any scenes of even non-violent racism in the movie. You're just gonna have your characters again like topically speak on it, and that feels like so forced and weird and like a little like heavy-handed, you know? Sorry, but like
no, you're fine.
Again, like as like James said, like I feel like there's a huge issue with the tone of the movie that could have easily been solved by like making it what's honestly a bit more realistic. It's crazy that this man like never got talked to by the cops once in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's weird. It's a little too weird.
No, and I agree with you, and I think like not to completely like always be defending the movie.
No.
But I think maybe what they were trying to I think maybe they just didn't have the real estate to do that. If you get what I mean, I think
like the money.
No. I mean, in terms of like narrative real estate, like I think kind of trying to have some sort of like presence of the police before the final showdown or whatever would have maybe detracted too much from because I'm sitting here thinking of like, okay, yeah, what if we introduce a subplot where there's like police involved somehow, like cops are trying to find him and question him. Maybe the cops show up at her place of work and try to question her, and we see them being like awful to her just because she's a Black woman. But and I will also say that I am a big sucker for like transformation movies, like the sort of like werewolf, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type thing, or like a descent into madness movies. So I think I do give this movie a lot of credit for I loved Anthony's journey.
His performance from, and I'm probably going to bastardize the name and I apologize, but Yahya Abdul-Martin, he's fantastic. Yeah. He's fucking fantastic. He's really good in this movie. Yeah. And I just wish, like, at least with his descent into madness, I wish there was more of it, because it again, like, it just kind of ties into like that third act rush of just, it felt like a little too rushed. Like he does get obsessed with his work and his piece, but like it didn't feel like it wasn't quite as spontaneous as Burke. But
it's also that his final transformation is elicited by literally someone else. Yeah. Like his final transformation is the villain of the movie saws his hand off, and replaces it with a hook, right? And it's just kind of like, okay, I feel like at that point that should have been him doing it, right? Him going so crazy that he's like, I am Candyman, and just like,
crazy,
that's that's it, right? But it's not. It's an external force when much of his story has been this internal, reckoning with these stories and with what he's seeing and what he's, trying not to believe.
It felt like two different forces were trying to push him to be Candyman, because there's like the bee sting, which generally kind of goes unexplained throughout the entire movie. It's just he got stings by a bee and it transformed him, which is a really cool effect.
Yeah,
it's such a cool, and I think it's such a cool idea too, to just be like, that's how we're gonna implant the idea, is like a literal infusion of an idea through a sting. But I think that it just they didn't pay that off well enough.
Yeah,
where it's
I think like maybe focused on that for the ending.
Maybe cut the the villain entirely. Just have it be him, fully losing himself to this madness of whatever.
You either cut the villain completely, as you said, or as James said, give him much more screen time. Yes. I personally would have enjoyed that a bit more. To get back on my gripe with the themes here.
Real quick though. But please. I think giving him more screen time would have, again, just like if we had given the cops or the idea of police brutality, like racial police brutality. If we had given those things more screen time, we would have had less time for the incredibly interesting transformation into the myth itself.
Yeah, it's my dream would be my dream would have been like, this movie is extended by 20 minutes to a half an hour to fit all this stuff, to make it so it doesn't feel rushed, because it feels like a lot of juggling of trying to do so much in such a tight 90-minute time frame.
I think you could also, there's a marriage, I think, of our two ideas where sorry, I don't remember the guy's name in the movie.
Burke,
yeah. There's a marriage where Burke is the villain, but he's not the, I'm going to saw off your hand and literally make you the Candyman villain. He's I'm the one who's been kind of like in, like, behind the scenes pulling the strings of leading you to all these different avenues of investigation and different stories so that you become the Candyman yourself. But then it's Anthony, who is the one who eventually pulls the trigger and completes the transformation himself.
Yeah.
Go on,
That
Mike.
would have been
Sorry.
more. No, it's fine. Like that version again to me would have been more interesting, but the version that we got is again a quick villainous expo about his motive, Burke. I mean, and his motive. He like straight up says he's creating a new Candyman, being the protag. He's going to turn him into the next Candyman in order to sow more chaos and more death and like in a sense free his community from the oppressor. That's like straight up the character's quote, and I feel like that solidifies the theme that I've been saying has been being drove home a little too often in this film. And if that's your character's like whole motive, that's like the reason that we get that really cool scene that looks so good, to me it still doesn't feel good or taste good or whatever, because the narrative is just a little, in my opinion, like it I'm not sure how to say it, and I've like thought about it a lot, but I just feel like this movie chose to tackle a really serious theme and seemed to not take itself seriously in the process, and I just thought that was like whack. And there were parts of me like having fun with the movie, like thinking like, especially with the way that his film ends, and we can like get into it after this like last bit. But if you're going to end this movie with like such a powerful, crazy, like honestly crazy scene, I feel like there definitely should have been more respect paid for the urban myth that it was trying to portray and like give new life into. It should have given more respect to the theme that urban myth is steeped in for the sake of the movie. And like, I gotta be honest, I was just mad that this movie did the things it did and didn't end with an army, a legion of Candymen swarming all of the police.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Fuck you.
Precincts like full of bees, like blowing them up into bees.
Millions of Candymen storming a police station.
About this, then like do it right, or like go all the way, or like don't
I think
go around. Like
sorry,
no,
not to keep being like, I think that's what the movie was going for. But
really?
like I think the, as funny as the like every single black person who gets murdered by the cops is a Candyman idea is, I think that what the movie is trying to say is that every single one that like becomes kind of like a story does, where it's like, oh yeah, there's this spooky bedtime story about like this guy got murdered and he's gonna come get you if you say his, like whatever.
In that sense of the theme, the protagonist, Anthony, would have been the Candyman because his paintings became a little popular.
I guess, yeah, it would have been like, oh yeah, this is it would have essentially been like a bastardization of the Tony Todd or like Tony Todd Candyman origin, where it's like, oh hey, there was this painter and he got murdered, but it's like, oh, which painter? Because there's two in the mythos, so it's like, oh yeah, like it, it's another kind of like word of mouth where you're like, I heard the painter fell in love with a white woman and that's why he was murdered. I heard he was doing this, like blah blah blah. But I also think that like, this is just off the top of my head, that ending scene with because essentially what happens at the very end is that the girlfriend, I forget her name, Brianna, she summons Candyman in the like mirror of the, like in the rear view mirror of the cop car,
back of the police car.
and that scene like is very enjoyable to watch because it's like, oh wow, this is like, you know, you're seeing Candyman in action. This is insane, you know.
Candyman arrives and doesn't kill her.
Does it make any sense? Because he doesn't kill her.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
He kills everyone else around her, and it's like if they had somehow established a little bit more that like he wouldn't, because Anthony is a part of the myth now, and therefore she's summoning Anthony, who would not kill her because it's Anthony. Then it's like,
the way to think about it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I think they probably were going for, because it's also like,
I hope so, to be honest. Yeah,
but then it's like, you know, like why? That's not. Again, it goes back.
The rules, right?
Yeah, and they're breaking the rules, but it also kind of goes back to that, like what I said earlier about like, oh, we don't necessarily need to know what the Candyman wants because it's supposed to be this. Yeah, it's supposed to be this supernatural force, and therefore, you know, like it's just it should be partially unknowable, but I think the rules still need to be consistent for it. So yeah, I mean, like again, and I really liked this movie. I can still be critical about things that happen in it that maybe don't make sense or maybe could have been made a little bit better, even if I really enjoyed it.
I mean, it's like that's one of the things. Like I even was telling you when we were watching Twin Peaks. I love Twin Peaks, but I'm very critical of season 2. And I even had to skip like every scene of James Hurley in season 2 because it's like, it kind of becomes a bit of a mess due to all these outside factors and et cetera, et cetera. Like you can still criticize something that you love, and me, yes,
and you,
but you can still criticize something you love, and similarly, like you can like praise something you don't like. Like as much as I hate this fucking movie, I think it's a very well shot movie. It's a very stylish movie. The score, while not quite as strong as Philip Glass's score for me, is pretty strong. One of the things that I noticed when watching the new film for a second time is the opening credits actually parallel the opening credits of the first film, where the first film is Chicago and Cabrini Green from a sky level, and it's an aerial overhead shot of it, whereas the opening credits of this film is Chicago and Cabrini Green from the ground level. It's like, that's clever. That's a neat little thing where it's paying homage to the first film while putting its own spin on it.
Can we talk about
and the shadow puppets?
The shadow puppets now?
Yeah.
Please, yes, let's talk about the art direction in this film.
Yeah, I don't want to get canceled.
Oh my
Lee,
God.
you should lead this because you've been kind of quiet.
Oh, it's God. Okay. I'm a sucker for simple tricks done really well. Okay.
Agreed.
Let's talk about mirrors. The most bastardized, butchered jump scare tactic in modern day horror is someone opens the medicine cabinet and then shuts it down. Okay, even the original Candyman had one of those. But this movie did a lot of really fun stuff using like mirrors to create different angles so that, you know, there's always an out of focus Candyman in the background, and then they'll cut away and come back and he's gone. I'm a sucker for little shit like that. They filled a lot of Haunting of Bly Manor with little tricks like that. And like to the extent that there were threads of people collecting, no, wait, timestamp at 32:46, pause it right there, and there's the feet of a ghost, and then he's gone in the next scene. Like, I love that kind of stuff. And Candyman 2021 did a really good job of playing with angles, using mirrors, and using them in an artistic way as opposed to just jump scare fuel. But Jesus Christ, these shadow puppets. Again, a really simple technique, but used artistically perfectly.
Yeah,
it's like
normally in like
it's so good.
Normally in like most movies or whatever, where it's like if we get a story explaining exposition. Like, we'd either get a flashback, or it would just be kind of a dry scene of someone explaining it and whatnot. Whereas here, there's 3 instances where we're told backstory / exposition, and instead of going for the flashback, or instead of going for just dry exposition, it is this little shadow puppet presentation of what went down, and it's really, really, really well shot, and it's very stylish.
Yeah, very, very powerful imagery. I like when, like you said, the creative approach is taken to things like that, because Village did that. Village opening up with like a mock stop motion storybook was a really smart play. Anything to avoid, like, okay, here's some actors dressed like they're 10 years younger with a sepia filter over it. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Can we not? What was that scene? There was one scene that left me really, really giddy from a cinematography standpoint. The death of the critic. When we're pulling away from her high-rise suite, and it looks like she's just staring out the window. She's almost out of view, and then silently she's lifted off the ground. Blood smears against the glass of her apartment as she's being dragged across it, all as she's maybe filling, like, her room's filling like a fourth of your screen, and you're too far away to hear any of the struggle, any of the carnage.
Yeah.
And then just a nice little cut to the next scene. Just like, fuck, like, finally some delicious fucking food. Like,
yeah, like that's one thing I can also say too, is like, even though, like, at least for me, none of the death scenes were particularly scary, which was a bit of a downer. They were so stylistically shot that I didn't mind it. And it was just very nice to see at least creatively shot death sequences after fucking the Fear Street goddamn trilogy and the asinine shit of Spiral.
To repeat from Lee, finally some good fucking food.
That's
it's like this and Malignant both had some really good, like, well shot on-screen deaths.
And that's actually one thing that, like, I'm even though I'm still kind of apprehensive about it, just because I'm in camp, I don't know if we needed another one as much as I like the franchise. With Halloween Kills, I'm genuinely expecting good cinematography based off the previous film, and really well shot, well executed death sequences on top of a bitchin' score by John Carpenter. And if that's all I get, then I'll be happy. And I just don't want more Fear Street, man. Just these flat, boring, like, if you're gonna do a slasher or whatever, like, I want, if it's not gonna be scary, then make it really well shot and stylistic.
Yeah.
Or creative.
This movie was that. Yeah, I looked great for sure, and I think that's a thing that we definitely all are on the same page about.
Yeah.
It looked great.
Yeah.
So let's get spicy again and talk about the ending.
Oh my god.
No.
Oh, okay.
What are you saying, James?
All right, so
yeah. This is.
I know exactly what James wants to harp about.
Oh God, yeah. I'm gonna shut up and let James talk. But also, I think, even though I've been a staunch defender of this movie for this entire podcast, I think this is probably like the one point where I'll mostly concede. I think. So go on, James.
So, Brianna, Anthony disappears after visiting his mom. And Brianna goes back to the apartment because they kind of split after he had a little episode and was, like, throwing shit to prevent her from, like, summoning the Candyman, and she took it as him going psychotic, which, to be fair, he was going psychotic even though he was trying to protect her. So she finds a pen from William Burke's laundromat, and because he heard about the Candyman from the laundromat guy earlier in the movie, she heads there to inquire about Anthony, and shortly after getting there, gets abducted by William Burke that is our first thing of just, oh, William Burke's the villain, he abducts her. And it just feels weird and rushed and comes out of nowhere. And then we get William Burke, as she's waking up, calling the police and talking about a crazed black man with a hook running around Cabrini Green, covered in blood. And he gives his exposition about how he wants to sort of bring Candyman back as a sort of punishment for racism and gentrification, and proceeds to saw off Anthony's hand. And then we get a chase sequence because she manages to escape into the tunnels, I guess, of this church, or these hallways, which are really, really dark. And Burke decides to chase after her, kind of slasher movie villain style. All of a sudden, they get into a little kerfuffle. And then we get a particularly brutal scene where she stabs the ever-loving fuck out of him to death with a pen. I think it's a pen.
Mm-hmm.
And then Anthony shows up, and she kind of is a little scared of him because he's completely zoned out. He's kind of in this almost like a trance. Fugue state, yeah. Of
and
just
half of his body
and
is
half
like
of his body is
full of
just
holes. He's
like
like
mutilated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got this hook for his hand now because Burke just chopped off his hand with a fucking saw and just rammed a goddamn hook into it. And he kind of walks over to her, and she's still like super scared and confused, and he collapses on the floor, and she, drops down to like comfort him and try to like tend to him or whatever.
I need to stress again, on the floor.
On the floor. And completely, just out of it. And the cops show up, you hear them outside, you see the sirens. She screams in here. We see a shadow of a cop run into the room. We see her, and he goes, let me see your hands. She raises her hands and is trying to say, he needs medical attention, and it cuts back to the shadow and gunshot. The cop just guns down Anthony as he's on the floor in her arms in a very, at least for me, David Cage Heavy Rain type sequence of the cops gunning down Ethan as his child standing 2 feet away from him, running the risk of potentially shooting her in the process, especially because of exit wounds, but whatever. This racist cop just immediately shoots him. And yeah, then she gets taken outside and is in handcuffs, and a racist cop is like, yo, you're gonna say our side of the story, otherwise we're gonna claim that you were an accomplice, even though we literally don't have anything to indicate that you were an accomplice, but we're racist. And then she does the whole Candyman spiel in the back of the car into the rearview mirror, and Anthony comes back to life and murders the ever-loving fuck out of the cops, and we get CGI Tony Todd face. Yeah. And that was kind of the moment of the movie that completely lost me. Because I know shit like that happens in real life, but at least from like a narrative perspective, it felt super heavy-handed, and especially after everything that had happened, and with no real presence or build up to the racist cops. It's just take your real world stuff about what's going on and apply it to the logic of this movie. And yeah,
there is a way to drive home the message that they intended and still have it come off as more realistic. And like you said, yes, horrible events like that do unfortunately happen. But it's diminishing the intended message by going with something that can be perceived as just so out of left field. Like, okay, have him not fall over. He's dazed. He can barely stand. He's needing her help, maybe. And cop comes in, pistol drawn. Get your fucking hands in the air. And he manages to get his hands up, sees the hook.
Yeah.
He's got a weapon. Bam. And then discharge.
Which not to bring this up, but is actually something Spiral did kind of, right?
Yeah.
Fuck Spiral.
I know, fuck Spiral,
Spiral.
but the ending of that is basically exactly what you just described.
Don't you have Spiral prove my point?
Basically. Or even because I remember when we watched it, you guys were saying that you thought you saw like some different like hallucination or something of like maybe like it was the way it was shot, like Anthony was appearing differently.
Or the villain stood back up and he got shot. I don't know.
So this is my interpretation, and again, it is perhaps I'm giving the movie a little too much credit because of my level of enjoyment of it. But because we have that shot of right after the cops have burst in and started shooting, we have that shot of her sitting on the ground without his body draped over her. That made me think that like, because I think what the movie was either trying to say he immediately disappeared after he was shot, or it's trying to say that each person was seeing something different, that he had already become Candyman at this point. So it was a moot point almost to kill him because he was already as good as dead, basically.
I think you're a much better writer than the one that we got, Cap. Sorry.
What we got instead was that clip from Chappelle's show where they raid Bill Burr's house. Get on the ground! And he's got a cute little golden retriever just smiling at the cop. He's got a dog! And they shoot it in the head. That's what we got instead.
I was or that scene of Harold and Kumar where there's the black man sitting in the jail cell, and the jail cell opens because Harold and Kumar escape, and the cops run in and just look at the black man and go, "He's resisting arrest!" And they just start beating him. Like, I don't want to compare it to fucking Harold and Kumar, goddamn it.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
it's just a weird, like, it's just a weird tone. Yeah.
It's tonally jarring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's confusingly shot.
It is confusingly shot as well. I think that's my biggest gripe about it is for a movie that has been relatively clear up until that point to suddenly get so, I don't want to say artistic, but a word like that, to suddenly get so like avant-garde or like, like, oh, it's up to your interpretation. It's kind of like, yes, and obviously I had a satisfying interpretation of it, but a lot of other people didn't, certainly that I watched the movie with. So I think maybe a little bit of clarification could have gone a long way into your audience feeling fulfilled by the end.
What was your guys' interpretation of the girlfriend saying the name in the mirror, and instead of her not being killed, all of the cops died instead? Like, how did that land for you all?
It jumbled the message of what Candyman is supposed to be.
For sure.
It solidified, at least in my mind, the theory that going forward, Candyman is meant to represent he's a personification of the revenge of this black community.
Exactly.
That's been the victim of racism and police brutality. It throws out the window everything that we've established about the character beforehand.
Exactly.
It even throws out what the movie shows us, because like after Burke kidnaps Brianna, we get a flashback scene where Burke's sister is in the bathroom with her friend summoning Candyman, right? And Burke's sister is just this teenage black girl, and Candyman just comes in and just murders her for no real reason, because just that's how Candyman works. You say Candyman 5 times in the mirror, he comes and he murders you, but then at the end of the film is like, nah, fam, I'm not gonna kill you because I'm gonna kill these racist fucks. Even though it breaks the rules.
Yeah, it's almost like within the same movie, all of the flashback scenes, the scenes that like happened before the present script or whatever, are all of the old canon, and all of the deaths that happened in the present of the movie are this new concept of the racial revenge spirit, you know, and it's just really jarring. Yeah, it's just weird.
It's hard to keep the original spirit of the character and take it in that new direction at the same time without losing something.
Exactly.
Okay, so hear me out real quick, guys.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back a little bit over that final scene those final scenes, the end of the movie, and what? Okay, sorry, formulating.
Sure.
What if the Anthony Candyman is sort of Burke's way of sort of like taking back the myth and basically using it as a defender of his community rather than like a slasher figure within it.
Yeah.
Right? I don't actually know if this is a correct interpretation, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm kind of like, and again, this just goes back to the movie needed 20 more minutes to make this make this point hit home. If that is in fact the point, but because of what you guys were just saying about how those two kind of motives, the before Anthony and after Anthony, don't quite line up.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why. But then why did we see Tony? But then why did we see Tony Todd at the end?
Exactly.
Okay.
It had two great ideas and tried to push them together. And
it's trying to be multiple things and say multiple things, and it's juggling all these different themes and ideas, but it just doesn't have the space to breathe. Like even thinking about it more too. It could have even maybe benefited from being sort of like a Netflix or HBO Max limited series to like really let it breathe and flesh out all these ideas.
Yeah, I can see that.
And be like a slow burn sort of thing.
I mean, you could have gotten a Bly Manor out of it or something.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of limited series just because generally speaking, I'm either, well, no, I wouldn't say that. I like things that are finite. So, and I like things that are kind of shorter. I like movies, basically.
Sure.
I like to spend 2 hours and get a full picture of everything that's going on. Yeah, exactly. I don't necessarily like to sit for 6 or 7 hours and be like, ooh, what does all this mean kind of thing. That's why I'm always hesitant to start a new TV series or anime series or anything like that, because it's like, okay, this is a much larger commitment than me popping a movie on and deciding 20 minutes and I don't like it. Because if I don't like the first 20 minutes of a TV show, it's like, oh well, there's 8 more hours, maybe I'll like the rest of it.
Or you could wind up with like a case of True Detective season 2, where midway through the season it just shits the bed so fucking hard, and then the ending shits even harder. I feel that.
Hello, Lost finale, my old friend.
or as both of us are 24 fans, I'm sure we can attest to how rocky sometimes 24 got.
Yeah, the gradual decline, not so gradual either, but
it was a roller coaster of just starts strong, kind of dips, goes back up, kind of dips, goes back up, really dips. Season 6 was super rough, man. Season 6 was quite rough. Super rough.
Yeah.
Like, oh man. And season 8 was pretty rough too.
We're getting slightly off topic though.
Yeah,
do we want to wrap up Candyman and then go to our concluding what we've all been up to media-wise?
I wouldn't mind, because I feel like the last thing that I have to say about it is kind of my concluding statement, so I've been just holding on to it.
Cool.
But
you want to start?
Yeah, if we are going to wind it down there.
Yeah.
This was okay to encapsulate. I think this is a good, well done horror film that could have been something so much better, with with more attention put into nuance in the script and a clear message. This movie is capitalizing on, but not taking advantage of, a sensitive social climate we have right now.
Fully agree.
I love that this movie had the guts to come out in the middle of what's undoubtedly one of the most important social movements of our generation, Black Lives Matter, and to make a statement about it. But in trying to cover that topic and also remain faithful to the core source material and have, the Candyman character be present, it's tearing itself apart trying to be two things at once. I think that if they decided to do away with the original Tony Todd character and fully 100% commit to the Candyman being reimagined as this spirit of vengeance, they could have made a very powerful film. Mm-hmm. I think that it has an identity crisis, but I think that what we're left with is still an enjoyable viewing.
Agreed. I couldn't have said that better myself. I feel like you just said anything that I may have just said.
I think that's a really nice, succinct summary of how I feel as well. Even though I think maybe I enjoyed it a little more than you, but I do agree that it could have been better. But I'm also like, I'm sorry, I'm such an apologist for this movie. I really like.
Don't apologize.
I'm saying it's good. It could have.
It really was.
Yes.
Could have been great.
I agree with you. I think and I know Jordan Peele did not direct, but he is one of the writers credited. In terms of his writing credits, it's no Get Out, but I did like it better than Us. So
yes, I'll agree with that.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a whole other podcast.
And I think that the director Nia DaCosta, her name, yes. I think she did a brilliant job, like absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
and
direction was very nice.
I really hope she does more horror movies because I'll see them.
My final thought is just stop fucking CGI facing, please. Stop it. Like I know he's a ghost. I know hypothetically he wouldn't age, but you know what is gonna age? That CGI face. It's gonna age really fucking terribly.
It wasn't fucking it wasn't Reptile in Mortal Kombat.
No. It wasn't, but
and it wasn't new Luke, like de-aged Luke Skywalker either.
Grandma
fucking
Tarkin
CGI Carrie Fisher, fucking Barbie doll Princess Leia showing up. But I guess my other final little nugget thing, just personal pet peeve, minor nitpick, despite the fact that I hate the movie, is and I know why. But CGI bees, man.
No.
I know why, but just like that image of Tony Todd opening his mouth and his mouth is literally filled with bees.
James, it's not the 80s anymore. Haunting. We can't abuse our actors.
Hey. Tony Todd may have gotten stung, but as I mentioned, he got $1,000 for every single time he got stung.
We're talking about abusing the bees.
That's true.
Those are long work hours, and those bees aren't being paid.
The one
and their children apparently.
Baby bees. The one who had the most
babies.
The one who had the most at stake. The one who had the most at stake was Virginia Madsen, who was fucking apparently deathly allergic to bee stings.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, though. We can't do that.
You really can't do that anymore.
Well, we can. We're just lazy. Just
no,
leave.
James,
I'm not asking for
there's actual laws
no.
and regulations. They unionized.
He's like,
the bees
have
unionized.
unionized.
The bees unionized.
And like on another note too, if Candyman going forward is more sort of to be representing like black rage and racial injustice and whatnot, and I was kind of joking about this with Mike, but it's also not quite a joke. I'd like to see a Candy Lady or Candy, like, because again, it's like Breonna Taylor and
Exactly.
Even going back further, even though she wasn't murdered by racism, like Rosa Parks suffered a lot of racial injustice, like older women or children. Like I think one of the shadows kind of implied there was a child boy Candyman, but yes. Like I would love to dig more into that. Like
I think leaving out because the child one was I was a little scared they were going like Emmett Till on that, and I was like, I don't know if we should bring in like obviously real world violence, like real world racial violence is a very real thing that this movie is obviously touching on, and it should be taken very seriously, and I don't think that like a horror movie is the best place to be like, hey, this real world murder victim, I'm like, no, I don't. Agreed. No, that sits really wrong with me. Sorry.
I for me at least, like, I mean, I wouldn't want like a real world murder victim, obviously, but like, I think especially if it's handled a certain way or whatnot, like, it could, like, to go back to say Night of the Living Dead, even though it wasn't necessarily George Romero's intention, like Ben's death in the movie evoked a lot of, this is so reminiscent of like, Martin Luther King getting shot or Malcolm X getting shot and whatnot. So sure. Like, I think you could kind of do something without completely bringing in real world shit and doing disservice to an actual dead kid.
I think it's just treading carefully.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if you bring the Holocaust into a movie, like you don't.
You got to take it seriously.
You got to take it seriously, and you got to because there are actual people who were really
affected and died because of it.
Yes, but like not just the victims, but the families and people of. There's far-reaching consequences for that level of hate and violence, and I think films just need to be very smart about how they tackle that.
They do. They very do. They very much do.
Similar to my feelings on including sexual assault.
Yes.
Which we've talked about many times. It's you have to give it the seriousness that exists in real life behind it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Whether or not a writer is capable of it, they need to figure that out. But it's just a matter of how it's handled and if it's tackled with delicacy and care and not sort of in an offensive, exploitative manner.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so do you want to intro this next segment?
Sure, because we kind of briefly touched upon it at the end of Malignant, of just discussing other horror movies, and Kat had the idea post-podcast of maybe including a segment after we're done with the discussion of what we've been up to since the last podcast, like what we've been watching, what we've been playing, as opposed to just the super short seconds at most outro of what we are going to be doing.
Yeah, well, because especially like, all of us are very busy people. We all have jobs. We all do other things outside of this podcast and our watch parties. So sometimes we don't always, watch the same things. This time, we all got together to see Candyman, but, we've also been watching other horror movies and playing other horror things. So, or, non-horror too. Just like what you guys have been doing and, maybe some recommendations for our audience.
Nice.
If they like our stuff.
That sounds fun. Yeah.
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 Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Why not?
So yeah, I very recently finished streaming Medium, which is
It all ends in me.
which is a Bloober Team game. It very much, I know James did not like it. There were definitely aspects of it I did not enjoy, but ultimately it was very reminiscent to me of a lot of the older, jankier point and click like murder mystery games I would play as, when I was younger.
Mhm.
So I very much enjoyed it. It was just that with a bit of an upscaled budget and a bit of a nicer, more polish to it. Definitely not wholly polished, as I pointed out in my stream, but I think anybody who's into like Black Mirror or Still Life or, even like Longest Journey or Siberia, like those kind of games, I feel like you would translate well to Medium if you're into horror and those kind of games. Then I think I mentioned it very briefly on this podcast, but I did watch Jacob's Wife, which I was really, really excited for because it's Barbara Crampton's like return to horror, really, and she's like the leading lady in it. And she plays a preacher's wife, who is like very, very meek and kind of, put upon a little bit, not she's not extremely independent or anything, and she gets bitten by a vampire and turns into a vampire.
Whoa, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it is a very cool movie until the last like 2 minutes.
Oh well.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like the movie presented a really, really interesting dynamic between her and her husband. Because initially he's kind of like an overbearing, like he's a very typical like Puritan husband where it's like he's the man of the house and she's kind of just like the doting wife who's just like, taking care of everything. And then that dynamic kind of flips. He basically becomes a vampire hunter and like
crazy.
Yeah, no, but then he's also simultaneously helping feed her and helping her like hide bodies.
That's cool. Okay.
It's so cool, but then there's kind of this like final climactic moment where it's essentially she kind of reacts to him him basically still being protective and trying to save her, and like they have this kind of like, the thing is it's building up, they have a confrontation, but they also have a very deep love for each other. Like there's a moment where the master vampire who turned her shows up and is like, you should go eat your husband. And she's like, oh my God, I totally should. Like he just like triggers her hunger. But like instead she just like starts like, she's madly in love with him again. Like it's basically just like, oh, like I'm not going to kill him because I love him, basically. And it's like, oh, that's kind of an interesting take on it. And then they kind of just like, the end is like a joke where it's like, oh, she's a vampire, he's a vampire hunter. They don't trust each other anymore. And like, maybe one will kill the other. And they end on like a freeze frame of like her hissing at him and him like pulling out a steak.
Cue the Odd Couple theme.
Really it was. And I was just kind of like, man, I feel like that's a cop-out because I feel like they should have resolved that tension. And however, like, instead of just being like, well, what are you gonna do? Ba-da-da-da-da-da.
She's like a blood-sucking creature of the night.
Yeah, exactly.
He's an instrument of holy justice. What hijinks will they get into this week? Being married.
Exactly. Like I'm just like it really just should have, like, you set up something so clever and then you kind of just like didn't pay it off. And so ultimately I still think it's worth a watch because Barbara Crampton is wonderful as usual.
Where can I watch this?
Shudder. It's on Shudder for free. Yeah.
Shudder's really neat.
I'm gonna check it out. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I love Shudder. So I definitely recommend it if you can get it for free. But I think it's worth a rental too.
There's actually something on that I suppose I should have brought up after the show. But there's a movie on Shudder that I'm very interested that like looks cool, and I think that you guys may be down and perhaps could be a cool podcast for y'all. But I'll bring it back up when we're done, though, I guess.
Okay.
All right.
But I guess real fast to get through what I'm consuming in terms of media.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think long about it because I'm currently watching a show that I've been having like a ton of fun with. It's been making me like think a lot, and I'm just like having a blast. It's like something that's very deep in my like core nerd. FX show Legion. It's a X-Men spin-off story. Though if I didn't tell you it may take you quite a while to suspect that it is, and that's part of what's so attractive about this story to me. It's definitely as an X-Men fan, I like read the comic books. I've seen every show and movie, whatever. It's definitely one of the most serious, most like highbrow, like stylized in terms of like shooting, in terms of like the script. It's some of the just plain out like coolest stuff that I've like seen in a while, and it deals with one of my favorite themes in fiction, and that's godlike powers in the hands of an unstable person. Like that like trope is always so fun to me. But yeah, it's a ongoing series. I'm currently in the middle of season 3, and I'm still like going for the ride. It's crazy. So yeah, if any of you guys are X-Men nerds, sci-fi horror nerds, it's a cool one.
Okay.
It's a great mix of both those things.
Good stuff. I've got 2 going on right now. One is a book that I'm really, really digging into. It's a collection of short stories written by the great Robert E. Howard, who created Conan. He had a second character who did not get a lot of spotlight because of how popular Conan became. And that motherfucker's name is Solomon Kane. Solomon Kane is a fucking badass. He's
I didn't know that he made him though. That's cool.
Hell yeah. Solomon Kane is the second son of Robert E. Howard. He's essentially a paladin before we knew what a paladin was. He's a traveling instrument of justice in the service of his higher power. He's an expert swordsman. Just rolls around the earth, gets into adventures, helping the weak and fighting the dark powers of the world, and just all of these stories are so digestible. Like, I think the longest story in the book so far is like 30 pages. And some of them just have such great flavor and beautiful imagery. Fantastic stuff. I got a book that is a complete collection of everything that was Solomon Kane. So it's a nice like 400-page tome or something.
Nice.
And it's so damn good. And then play-wise, I haven't had a whole lot of time to give to it, but I am absolutely in love with a little game called Other Side.
I've been wanting to play that.
Oh,
it's good, huh?
Oh, Ghoulgutts.
Dude.
Let me tell you a little bit about Other Side. So, Other Side is a top-down, turn-based tactics combat game with permadeath and a beautiful grim art style. Without giving too much of it away, because I think there's a certain mystique to the landscape and the storyline that needs to be it needs to stay shrouded in some air of mystery. Other Side is concerning a being called the Child, who has brought upon an age of suffering. The entire world is painted in grayscale. Everything is a warped, macabre form of its former self. and you play as the daughters. You are a collection of these supernatural women fighters who are trying to end the child's reign over this world. And as you play through the game, you're discovering that all of these horrible visions that you're fighting are all rooted in very real problems and traumas. And by the time you reach the first boss, who's very early on, the surgeon, you realize that it is more of a deconstruction of mental trauma and illness, and you are quite literally fighting the horrors that are in this child's mind.
Yeah, this game seems so cool.
That sounds dope.
It is brilliant, and Mike, I'll want to get into this a little bit with you off stream, but the music in this game.
Oh, say no more. I mean,
it does something that I feel is very underutilized in games these days, which is layers and beats and chord progressions being added into the music as the fight progresses.
Yeah, like that's
the Mick Gordon touch, basically.
Yeah,
Mick Gordon, it's very Revengeance. You know, you get to the final phase and then rules of nature.
Totally.
Like,
it was so hyped, dude. Come on.
But in this, it's terrifying because like you're doing a boss fight and you're like, yeah, I'm doing really well, and then you hear a crunchy guitar riff get added into the background music, and you're like, oh no, I'm in another phase now, aren't I? And then like you'll land a critical blow, and the villain like turns red for a second. It's like, oh, did I kill him? And then vocals come in. And the villain starts using like his power moves against you, and there's permadeath. So you're terrified for your daughters. You're like, no.
Oh God!
I can't have my misery be set to this hype of a soundtrack.
Yeah, this sounds great for sure.
Other Side is the shit. I'm wanting to finish it as soon as possible.
Are you planning to stream it?
No, because this is such an experience that is set for just headphones and silence. You play this in darkness and dwell in that misery. Nice. I think instead of doing a video of gameplay, I am very tempted to do my first video essay.
Oh, no way! That'd
be cool.
I'm in love with this game.
That'd be so cool.
And it's nice to see a game that's able to juggle different mechanics like that and everything, and also approach the topic of mental illness and trauma with a really creative approach. You know, it's as fresh as the first Alice in Wonderland. What the fuck was
American
Madness Alice.
Thank you. Yeah, McGee. It's that first breath of fresh air for that in a while. Like I like a lot of what Evil Within tried to do with its approach, but Other Side just it's sweet misery.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely gonna take that in stride and put that on my list.
Oh yeah, you'll dig it.
That. Yeah, nice. Thanks for that.
James?
So basically, me, it's kind of just been a lot of rewatching stuff. Like, on the subject of like Tony Todd, I showed Mike the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead with Tony Todd as the lead, directed by Tom Savini.
Yeah, it was fun.
And you know, like it's a neat little sort of companion piece, and in ways it kind of, as George Romero puts it, kind of retroactively fixes some of the issues that he has with the original film that he would have done differently. Like, one of his big grievances with the original movie is he kind of thinks that the character of Barbara doesn't really have any agency. She's just kind of there in like this catatonic state throughout like the entirety of the movie.
Yeah, that's kind of whack.
Yeah, whereas like in the new film, she actually has much more of a fleshed out character and is like
she has a storyline and a story arc.
Yeah, she has like a lot more proactive scenes and whatnot. And then sort of to counteract that, because we were kind of in the zombie mood, I showed Mike Return of the Living Dead, which I have no real nostalgia for because I only saw it, I think, for the first time last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But since I first saw it, I think I've rewatched it a good, I don't know, 3 or 4 times in the last year, just because
Send more paramedics.
for me, it's sort of like a veg out movie where I can just kind of put it on in the background and just kind of watch it without it being one of the films that I've grown up with and I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So it's like I still kind of pay attention while I can still kind of veg out to it. And then in prep for Midnight Mass, I rewatched the entirety of Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, which I still absolutely adore. I haven't seen Blind Manor yet, even though I intend to at some point. And I love Timothy Hutton. That was kind of my main selling point going into the miniseries, even though he's barely in the fucking thing. And then, of course, I watched the first episode of Midnight Mass, but I stopped because I got too excited at the prospect of watching it potentially in a watch party, because it gave me a lot of very strong Salem's Lot vibes, and that's one of my two or three favorite Stephen King stories. So like the idea of Mike Flanagan kind of putting his own little spin on Salem's Lot seemed really, really interesting for me. And in prep for Dune, I kind of am tempted to watch the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, which is a documentary about the 1970s attempt to turn Dune into a movie by Alejandro Jodorowsky. And it's his pitch for Dune was kind of this massive fucking fever dream. Part of the reason why the film never got made was he was adamant about making it a 10-hour-long movie.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. It was it's noteworthy because so many films kind of existed because this film didn't get made. For example, Dan O'Bannon, who was hired as I believe the screenwriter for this adaptation of Dune, he was introduced to a little man named H.R. Giger, because H.R. Giger was hired as one of the artists for Dune. And that is what led to the creation of Alien, and why H.R. Giger got involved in Alien, because of this failed project. Like, even, like, I think Orson Welles was going to be playing Baron Harkonnen. Like, he had, like, all sorts of, like, crazy, like, big name actors from, like, the 70s attached to it, and it was, like, by all accounts, it like, seems like a great movie, or at least a interesting movie that we could have had, and instead we have a documentary about the making of the movie and what kind of came after the movie, after the project failed, and what kind of spun off from that. And it's been on my radar for a while, but I think because the new adaptation is coming out, I kind of want to finally sit down and watch that little documentary.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So
Thank you guys.
Yeah, let's
Absolutely.
shall we sign out? It's been almost 2 hours.
This has been a great one, yeah.
Yeah. Good
right.
Good chats, good discussions. I hope
indeed.
Saber, I decided not to quit.
Okay, thank you. I quit though.
Yeah.
I can't stomach the apologist cat.
What are you talking about?
No, I'm kidding.
Look, I mean, I think the whole point of this podcast is, if you like a movie, that's cool. If you don't like a movie, that's cool.
That's cool.
We can all just talk intelligently about it, even if we disagree.
Yeah. And not treat somebody else as if they're the worst person in the world just because they like or dislike something, and start accusing them of being something that they're not. Yeah,
like that's why I genuinely enjoy consuming media with you folks, because there's never a moment of, oh, you're an idiot because you like this, or you're racist because you don't like this. Yeah. So,
but really, if you don't like Malignant, blow it out your ass.
I don't want to be friends. I don't want to be friends.
Oh man! And if
also,
you like Corpse Party, Niku.
Oh,
no, I was gonna say, to be real, if you like Balan Wonderfuck, then get your life examined.
uh-oh.
That's fair.
No, we just.
I'm not.
I do.
So I am once again the Attack Cat, streaming on Twitch occasionally. Hopefully getting back into more Corpse Party VODs with these fine folk.
It's never happening again. I want to get Ghoulgutts on Corpse Party.
Oh God!
Special Ghoulgutts episode.
Run, Mike.
Good idea.
Mike, run.
Yeah, no, way. It's not gonna happen. Sorry. Love you, Saber. No.
Why don't you want to voice a lolly?
I'm tired of suffering. The suffering.
The suffering.
All right, this was your boy Lee Alder, the Valley Jester. Catch my shit over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Valley Jester. Trying to work back into a rhythm right now. I had a crushing week and a half at work, so I have not streamed since I did my Fortnite stream.
Bow, bow, bow.
I played one round and got first place. Certified Fortnite champion. Clicked uninstall. I peaked. I've been turning down offers left and right. Team Liquid offered me 6 figures. I said, make it 7 and get back to me. But yeah, we just started doing Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. And I don't know, we might do a little something soon to mix it up. But yeah, priority is going to be finishing Other Side and possibly writing a draft of that little video essay script. We'll see.
Yeah.
That's very exciting, dude. Yeah.
Cool.
Should be good.
And I am your boy. It's Mike. I am Ghoulgutts on Twitch. However, as I always say, I never stream. It'll happen again at some point. And
those
when
cosmic
it does,
nudes will find themselves.
Yeah.
It's becoming part of your sign-off. I'm Ghoulgutts over on Twitch. I never stream.
Yeah, dude. But when I do, it's spooky. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sure that one of these times when I'm featured again on the Gooncast, I'll have a valid plug for you guys. But today I do not. I just want to say thanks for allowing me to be a part of this discourse. It was fun.
Always,
it always is.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
it's our pleasure, man.
Yeah, and yeah, that's it for me.
And this is James, also Saber0307 on Twitch. Still kind of in the spooky season, even though I've been slacking a little bit, just due to life and other shit. But mostly we're just doing Back to Ghoul type stuff. Got some fun stuff planned for post Back to Ghoul. And I might have a little side project that I've been kind of sitting on for the last few years. Like sort of a little mini review thing. That might pop up in the near future.
The
Short
Drakengard retrospective.
No, that's already played out. But no, I have an idea as to what it'll be. It's just a matter of finding the right first entry and seeing if the insanity would actually work, because it's a particularly loony idea. I'll tell you about it off stream.
Okay, cool. Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah, but thank you all for tuning in and witnessing my cancellation live. And y'all take care of yourselves, stay safe, be excellent to each other, and Jojo, stop licking my ear. And I will catch you all. We'll catch you all next time.
And tell
everyone. Fuck CGI faces.
Yeah.
Amazing. Jojo, stop licking my ear. A classic.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.